Welcome to our fifth webinar on the implementation of the ground handling regulation. I'm very glad to see so many participants from across the industry and member states. I think we are now at 211 participants, or probably even more as I speak. It's now 233 who are joining us for this fifth webinar on what happens to ground handling safety reports. And probably one of the reasons why you are in aviation as me is that you believe that aviation is great because we have always learned our lessons from accidents, from incidents, from occurrences. We have learned them without looking at the persons that were behind these accidents and incidents, but trying to learn from the mistakes that were made and trying to improve the system as a whole. And this is really the essence of safety reports. And in ground handling, we are now starting to have ground handling as part of the aviation safety system framework. The regulation will apply very soon in 2028. And these webinars are crucial to help you from member states and from industry to prepare for what's coming, but also to make sure that we understand how ground handling, reporting on safety events in ground handling fits into the overall system of safety reporting and just culture. I'm very happy to be the moderator of this webinar today. My name is Julia Egerer, and I'm the section manager of the EASA Aerodrome and Ground Handling section, where we have developed the rules, but where we now really focus on implementation support, supporting you all in making sure this regulation can actually come to life, and you are a crucial part of making it happen. And I'm joined today by dedicated speakers who are experts in the field of ground handling, but also in the field of safety reporting and just culture. First of all, for those of you who are participating, we have launched the Slido. Slido is actually a tool, for those of you who don't know it well, where you can easily put your questions into the Slido tool. You could now take your mobile phone, for example, and scan this QR code and then put the password and the passcode in your mobile phone, and then you could easily access our Slido. The Slido will also appear in the webinar itself, but from experience, it works rather well if you just use your mobile phone and take a picture of this QR code. What is really useful using Slido is that you put your questions while we are speaking, while we are explaining, because we have dedicated 30 minutes for Q&A, but that you also monitor the Slido to see if there is a question that you find particularly interesting that somebody else has posted, and then you just do a thumbs up, and that question will actually move up the ladder, and we will give preference to those questions that have received the most likes. So even if you don't come up with your own question, please make sure that you use that Slido to make sure that those questions can be tackled first that are also of interest to you. So that's it for Slido. If you have any questions on the logistics of this webinar, you can put it in the chat. But for all questions about the content of what we are discussing today, please use Slido, because we will then also put our answers directly in Slido, and we will upload all the answers to your questions and the presentations on the EASA website, as we usually do. So you will have all the information there, and it's a good record of the discussion we're having today, but also if you want to pass it on to your colleagues, you will actually find all the information on the EASA website where this webinar has been promoted. So what are we trying to look at today? So today, the focus, as I've already explained, is on safety reporting. Aviation is very strong when it comes to safety reporting. However, in ground handling, we also know that there are probably more barriers to safety reporting than in other domains. And we are trying to look at the legal basis of safety reporting in this change where ground handling is now being included as a safety domain under the Aviation Safety Framework of EASA. And we will then have a panel discussion looking at the role of the ground handling organization in doing that. So what happens with my report? Where does it go? What is the role of the competent authority when this report is received? What is the role of EASA? What is done with all these reports that come from ground handling and other stakeholders that are related to ground handling safety? And then looking into the future, of course, how can we improve the reporting culture in ground handling? What can we do as an industry, as member states together? Maybe also some lessons learned from good examples of member states that have focused a lot on reporting culture, especially in ground handling. And then, as I said, we really have dedicated 30 minutes to questions and answers because we want to make sure that we can answer your questions. While, of course, it's difficult in a big webinar, the good tool of Slido is there to guide us to make sure that we get the most out of these questions and answers as well. So I would like to quickly introduce the speakers. And they're coming up now. So we're having here next to me Adina Söni, who is the ground handling expert, who many of you know already. And then we are having also as speakers, we have Sara Poralla, who is from EASA. She's the aviation safety risk manager, specifically also looking at ground handling. And then we have Peter Hunt. Maybe you just want to raise your hand, Peter, so we can see you. And you are joining us from Swissport, and you are head of quality, health, safety, and the environment, systems and standards. So it's also great to have you here. Then we are joined by Barbara Schaffner. Hello, Barbara. Barbara is a ground handling inspector from the Swiss competent authority, BOCA. And we also have a speaker, Joe Massé. Hello, Joe. And you are ground handling inspector from the Belgian Civil Aviation Authority. And then who hasn't joined us now, but he's going to join us at 1 o'clock when it's his slot to present, Yannick de France, who is from France, as the name suggests, and a ground handling inspector from the French Civil Aviation Authority. With me in the room, because you also have visibility of the room here at EASA, we also have Francesca Colopi, who's ground handling expert in the EASA team, and Michelle Goroc, who's also working with us on ground handling, especially with a focus on industry standards. So without further ado, I think we can move into the next bit, which is to make sure that we look at the legal basis of safety reporting.
Yes, because we want everybody to be on the same page. Please don't expect this webinar to be an introductory lesson into the regulations, because this is not going to be that. But what we intend to do is to let you know, or to remind you and to make sure that we are all on the same page here when we talk about the regulations that are creating the legal framework of what we are discussing here today. So what's really the key message that you should go home after you view this, or later on, or you are live with us in this session, is that a report is not paperwork. And thank you for the Croatian colleague who has helped me to actually, this is her slide and she has been using it before, and I liked it so much that I decided to use it also in this webinar. That's probably the most important message. You don't fill in the report just for the sake of writing paperwork. It's a lesson to be learned. It's something that we have to take back with us, reflect on why something happened, and prevent it from happening again. And that's why we write reports. And that's why we have these regulations that tell us anything that we have to do about reporting. What is important, and what we are briefly going to tackle about today, is something about capturing the information. So writing a report, what a report is, analyzing the data, in order to identify the causes and also to establish the trends and to improve the way in which we do things today in ground handling. So this is the objective. It's just like a lesson, let's say, or just a discussion. The conclusion of a discussion that I had with my friends over a coffee or over a beer is, oh yeah, so I really need to understand what makes a ground handling occurrence report useful, why it is useful. So I think we are going to talk mainly today about 3 regulations. The 2 ones that are already applicable since 2015 are at the bottom corner or at the bottom side of this slide, which are Regulation 376 on occurrence reporting and Regulation 2015 from Regulation 2015/1018, which indicates what events have to be reported under the mandatory reporting scheme. And then brand new, or no longer brand new, but still not applicable yet, we have the Ground Handling Regulation 2025/20, in which we repeat part of the requirements from Regulation 376 about a reporting system, but we also go a little further to describe, to provide more details about the safety reporting system that the organizations should have. Both of them are in 2 implementing rules, 160 and 165 in Regulation 20 for ground handling. This was published in 2025 and it's not applicable yet. It will become applicable on the 27th of March 2028. So again, the ground handling regulation defines the organization's reporting duties. It provides more details directly applicable to ground handling organizations compared to what we have in Regulation 376. So the EU occurrence framework defines how the safety information is protected, which is in Regulation 376, how it is analyzed and also followed up, also in Regulation 376. So what is briefly the content? And of course, this is an advice, a recommendation for you to go and read it or to read the elements in which you are mostly interested in. But this is just a summary of Regulation 376, which is already applicable since 2015. What its content is about? It's about reporting. So it provides information about the frontline safety information, let's say. It contains an article that tells organizations, member states, and the EASA how to collect the information data, the safety information and data, and how to store that data. Again, leveled on 3 layers: organizations, state, member state, that's competent authorities, and EASA or the Commission. How to protect the safety information and the safety data. So it talks about confidentiality and of course the crucial element, which is the just culture. It talks about how this data should be analyzed to identify the causes of events, to establish the trends, and how to measure the risk of the safety events that are reported. And it also covers the part of the follow-up, without which the feedback loop cannot be closed. So what actions and what mitigations need to be taken. This creates the feedback, and with all this interpretation, analysis, establishing the trends, identifying the causes, the system then is fed back with these lessons learned, which help us to improve it further more. So again, we are talking about a learning cycle. This is how the whole regulation should be viewed. What to report? This is another very important thing because, yeah, we talk about reporting a lot. Okay, we have to report, but do we know what needs to be reported? And this is why we have Regulation 2015/1018/4. And particularly Annex 4 is the one that is mostly in our interest when we talk about ground handling, because the second part of this Annex 4 contains the events that have to be reported under the mandatory scheme related to ground handling. So what is good about this regulation is that it categorizes the events that have to be reported on a domain-based list. So each annex with its own domain or domains. It establishes the common mandatory categories of events that have to be reported. And it also provides a consistent classification basis for, is this event reportable or not? So this helps organizations to identify what is a reportable event, what has to be reported. It shouldn't be understood that this regulation replaces some things. It does not. So the fact that since 2015, there is this clear list of events that have to be reported, doesn't mean that you as an organization should completely disregard how well you write a report. So the quality of the report, which we will see later on when Sarah will show you very interesting slides, how important it is that the reports have a good quality. Without a good quality, the reports can lead us in the wrong directions or are irrelevant. Inaccuracy of the information or the lack of information can distort the data or can even make the data difficult to interpret. So the classification of the events says what type of event is it that has to be reported, and the narrative, which is the second part of a report, that's the second aspect, tells actually the reader why these things matter. Okay. And when we move to the other regulation, the ground handling regulation, which is not applicable yet, but is there, which means it has entered into force, which means it cannot be ignored anymore, or it cannot encourage organizations to adopt procedures or processes that contradict what is in the ground handling regulation. So when we talk about the ground handling rules, we have two, as I mentioned before, Org Gen 160, which is an in nuce, let's say, summary of or most important elements from Regulation 376 that are reflected into the ground handling regulation now. And this rule, again, mentions that the ground handling organization has to identify, so has to have a system for occurrence reporting, has to identify an event, something that happens, has to report it, has to transmit this information, this report somewhere and to somebody in a somewhat form that we are going to discuss about. It has to, the ground handling organization also has to inform the other organization with which it has interfaces, the airdrome operator, the aircraft operator, sometimes depending on the type of event, depending on the occurrence, it may also have to inform the ATM and ANS provider. It may also need to inform the entity, the entity or the agency that is responsible for the dangerous goods event. So it depends on the event. And also this implementing rule talks about the follow-up. It refers as well to the timelines of reporting, so the 72 hours within which the information, the report has to be transmitted, and via which channel, which is eCares2, about which we're going to talk a bit later, and also later in the future. And then the other implementing rule talks about the reporting system that has to be developed by the ground handling organization in order to capture the data, to capture the information. So it refers to what kind of reports this reporting system should include: the mandatory reporting, the voluntary reporting, as well as the anonymous reporting. So the cases in which the identity of the reporter can be hidden when the reporting doesn't want the others or the organization to know who reports the event. Everything that we are talking about here is something that is already foreseen and included in Regulation 376. This implementing rule also requires the organizations to develop a system that includes processes and procedures for the analysis of the reports, to identify the causes, the contributing factors, to identify the hazards, and to establish trends. It also talks about the protection of the individuals who report. So we talk about the confidentiality, and of course the purpose of reporting not being that to apportion blame, but to apply the just culture principle. So the information from the safety reports will have to be used only to improve the system and not to blame somebody. It also talks about the act of investigating in order to prevent any reoccurrence. So the organization has to look inside to see, okay, to discuss the event internally, to have its own investigation team. And also, of course, last but not least, the feedback. Yeah, so the information that has to go back to the reporter, what the organization is doing in order to prevent the reoccurrence of such events, the lessons learned and shared internally. The implementing rule also refers to the fact that the reporting system should be simple enough to enable its use, its easy use by the frontline staff. It also has to be robust enough to enable further analysis and oversight. So the reporting flow, here we talk both about Regulation 376 and about the ground handling regulation, and this is actually the flow that we're going to talk about today. The frontline report, so the event happens in the field, yeah, either at check-in, at the acceptance area, within the computer, or on the apron. Who reports, yeah, so who generates the reports, where the report goes to, and what is the feedback, and what is the safety lessons. What are the safety lessons? This is a piece of information for you, further clarification, a reminder, because we know that for many of the ground handling organizations that have never been regulated before, this is the new thing. We have a manual, a document. This is an aid that is created by EASA for all the aviation domains, for all the regulations. We call this product Easy Access Rules. This is a document, it's an unofficial document that contains altogether the Commission regulation implementing rules and the EASA acceptable means of compliance and guidance material, which are the EASA decisions, in one single document for easy use. That's why we call it Easy Access Rules. The link is already in this slide, and you will see, you will be able to download the presentation after this event, so you can access the link. But if you Google Easy Access Rules for ground handling, that is going to be the page where you will land. So again, this is an unofficial document. It contains both the Commission regulations and the EASA acceptable means of compliance and guidance material, and it looks like that. Any blue title means that that rule is coming from the Commission regulation. Any yellow line with the paragraphs below means that they are an acceptable means of compliance published by EASA in the EASA decision. And the green line is the guidance material also published in the EASA decision. What these things mean, what is the level of application of these requirements and the AMC and GM? Well, whatever is in blue in this inverted pyramid here, so you see here that the basic regulation is the regulation that gives us the existence to the right to exist, EASA, and it also establishes what EASA should do, which are drafts to the Commission regulation. So the basic regulation is the big constitution of the European Union aviation safety. This is fully binding. It's a document that is very heavy in the sense that it requires the vote of both the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union. So it's a very crucial document for us. Then the next level is the one of the European Commission regulations. Let me take the laser to point.
That's
maybe better.
That's a good idea to use the laser.
Here, so these are the Commission regulations. And here we talk about Regulation 2025/20, which I just mentioned before, or Regulation 2025/23, which contains the authority requirements for ground handling. These are Commission regulations, implementing rules. Needless to say that they are also binding. So any non-conformity with everything that is written there would lead for the competent authority to raise a finding with an organization. And then we have the agency decisions, the EASA decisions, which contain the acceptable means of compliance and the guidance material for ground handling regulation, for ground handling domain I'm referring here, because we also have certification specifications, but I'm not referring to them here because ground handling regulations do not have such a thing. So the acceptable means of compliance are binding unless organizations or competent authorities come up with their own means to demonstrate compliance with the regulations.
And thank you, Adina, for this little crash course on the regulatory system of EASA. And we are doing this in this webinar because this, of course, is not related to the main question about safety reporting and reporting in general. But we understand from feedback from member states that for many of you, especially from the ground handling industry, you were never part of the European aviation safety framework. So many of you, when you are opening up these easy access rules, and you have told us that it's not so clear for you what these different colors mean, AMC, GM, and implementing rule. So we are trying to also in these webinars to pick up on implementation challenges where we see that, you as a stakeholder, you also will benefit from a better understanding of the system of that your regulation, the ground handling regulation fits into, and how to read all this material that we always provide. I think this is the main aim here, just to do a little bit of a legal crash course for all of you.
And please don't mind that also for the next webinars, we will probably come back and explain again where we stand with the blue lines, the yellow lines, and the green lines, because we will probably, and we hope that we will also have new people joining these webinars every time. So as Julia mentioned, this is a crash course on how you should use and how you should read the easy access rules. And to close, the guidance material is non-binding, is supposed to help you to understand the rules or to give examples of how you can implement the rules. Before we move to the next, which is going to be the panel discussion, because we are still in the legal framework, in explaining the legal basis, some important elements that I left for Sarah to explain, because she has already prepared very good material and she can complement what I just said. I will stop sharing, Sarah, and then you can take over. Yeah,
thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Adina. I think you did already a very good job with bringing the introduction to this at a very good level. But I just wanted to recall, maybe I get a presentation mode. Yes, just want to quickly recall one more time what is an occurrence. So an occurrence in the definition of 376 is any safety-related event which endangers or which, if not corrected or addressed, could endanger an aircraft, its occupants, or any other person. And it includes in particular accident and serious incidents. So occurrences are accidents, serious incidents, and hazards. Then there you find often when you are relating with or when you're touching the area of safety reporting, you will come across these abbreviations more and more. Mandatory occurrences to be reported and voluntary occurrences to be reported. In practice, most member states don't make much difference in the way they treat these coming in. Obviously, we have much more mandatory occurrences being reported than voluntary occurrences to be reported. But mandatory occurrences they represent, and we have people with knowledge had before the coming into force of 2015, 1018. Sorry about the typo, that will be corrected. People had dealt with making a list of what is the significant risks, which we already know about. And that's how this list of mandatory reports came about in the famous annex that was already mentioned, Annex 1 and up to 5. And so these are the known significant risks which we have to know about. And of course, there are others which you can report at your own wish. So the voluntary reports are then those that are not reported under the requirement for mandatory reporting, but it's any other safety-related information which is perceived by the reporter as an actual or potential to aviation safety. And that's important because the system has to be open to innovation. The list from 2015 is already probably outdated and could have been supplemented with other significant risks, but they have not been defined there yet. And we don't open up these legislations every year, but we open them up on a regular basis. So, for example, you might know that there is currently, the experts among you might know that there's currently a piece of legislation in the EASA committee where we will introduce a sixth annex, which is the mandatory reports for the unmanned area, unmanned aviation. So that's going to be coming up. And we also introduced a Part IS occurrence into that update. And so we'll be reviewing this from time to time, but not as often as we'd like to, but when we have the opportunity. So that's just the one thing I wanted to say about supplement what Adina has said. Then I have also another way of viewing the occurrence reporting regulatory framework in Europe. So you see obviously our relationship with the ICAO annexes and 19 and 13. You see the different legislations which are coming from the EU directly. So the 996 on the accident incident reporting and the 376 which has some implementing rules below, and the neighboring system of the EASA basic regulation and its mandatory and its implementing rules below. So that's another way of viewing the same thing which you also introduced. But maybe just a few elements on the just culture. The just culture is a key element of the 376. It's situated in the annex, in the Article 16 of the 376, protection of information sources, and that's the protections of the reporters, obviously. And it's also in the intentions and in the Article 2 and the definition of what is just culture. So the scope of the just culture is basically to ensure that there's no punishment for honest mistakes and human errors, yet there is accountability for gross negligence and intentional acts. So there's a fine line between of what is human error and what is then becomes deliberate or even criminal intent. And the protection of the reporters who are reporting honest mistakes and human errors, they shall not be subject to sanctions except for severe misconduct cases. Let's say, example, someone has been taught endlessly about not doing a certain thing and he keeps on doing a certain thing. Then there is an element of, okay, you're not able to learn that you shouldn't be doing something. So there might be consequences there in your organization. The protection of data, the confidentiality of data, and safety only use of the data, that's very important, so that there is a relationship also between the NAAs, meaning the National Aviation Authorities, and the judicial system of every state, that there's the confidentiality is kept, and that the information is used for the improvement of safety only. And that's something that the EASA even goes out and looks at the implementation in the member states on behalf of the European Commission, so that the safety, the just culture principles are actually a lived culture and not just something that's written somewhere, but not adhered to. Then the learning and the feedback, analysis and safety improvement is another principle. The oversight mechanism is also important. There must be an independent national just culture body where persons could complain if they felt that they had experienced negative consequences as a result of reporting honest mistakes and incidents and so forth. And as I said already, the implementation, member states need to implement and make just culture a lived reality. And definitely the balance again, safety learning versus accountability. So maybe that's just a couple of lines which I want to supplement. Yes, I think I'll give the slides back to you.
Thank you very much. We cannot talk about reporting without talking about the reporting culture and without mentioning the just cultures, obviously. Thank you very much. I think it's time
to have a panel discussion.
Exactly.
So what we have done as well, we have launched a quick poll to see where you are joining us from. So 73 of you have already replied where you are joining us from. The majority of you are joining us from Europe, so that's good to know. So in case you haven't yet replied to that poll, just again use the Slido code that I also put in the chat and the password to let us know whether you're joining us from Europe or the rest of the world. But now we can move to the next part, which is the panel discussion, where we want to really see what is actually the starting point about these safety reports, because we talk about the journey, and a journey starts with a departure. So for that departure, of course, the organization and those of you that are working in ground handling organization, that is really the most important part. And that's why I would like to give the floor to Peter from Swissport to take us through who is reporting, how do ground handling employees actually know what they must report, because we're already having some questions in the Slido as well. What is the difference between mandatory and voluntary reporting? And the industry here, the ground handling organization, of course, you are at the center. You are the most important part of this puzzle, because if the people that you employ don't understand what has to report it and why and what is just culture, then the whole system doesn't work from the start. So the foundation is just culture, as Sarah has explained, but it's also then the next step, the organization that enables this reporting. So I'd like to give the floor to you, Peter. I understand you had some difficulties to unmute yourself, but it should be okay right now.
I think I'm okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, it works really well. And you can share your slides if you have any, or I don't think you have any exactly. So we are just going to have a discussion. That's also very good. So how does it actually work for you as a company? Who should report? And how do you take it as a ground handling organization? How do you transmit that information, that training, that knowledge to the people that are working for your organization, Swissport, in making sure that they understand what to report and who should report?
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Good morning and afternoon, everyone. So yeah, obviously it starts with day one, really. You know, when an employee joins the organisation. So culture is a massive part of any organisation. And at Swissport here, we obviously encourage that reporting culture and just culture that's embedded from their initial training. In terms of, you know, the complexity of voluntary reporting, mandatory reporting, hazards, all of that kind of stuff, we're kind of more general than that. We encourage all reporting, you know, and the motto being, if you think you should report it, well, then just report it. So we really strongly encourage that for all of our initial training and recurrent training and all of those opportunities. To give you a bit of a flavour of, you know, the reporting size and scope within Swissport. So, you know, we're obviously a large ground handling organisation, 66,000 employees worldwide. Last year alone, we had over 110,000 reports coming into our system globally. So it's a big number. Luckily, all of those weren't mandatory. I'd like to hasten to add. So we have different reporting types. You know, our base level reporting type is actually one that I really encourage amongst our organisation, which is actually recognition reports. So it's recognising when the teams do well, when the teams go above and beyond. You know, is just as important as you know the other level of reports as well. So we had 26,000 of those reports last year. So that represents quite a chunk of the data that we get in. Then our biggest chunk of data comes from hazard reporting. So these are, you know, those potentials for bad outcomes. No bad outcome actually occurred, but the potentials for bad outcomes. So yeah, we had about 87,000 reports in that area last year. So from those two blocks alone, we're already at, you know, the 100,000 reports, which kind of suggests that we've got, you know, a reasonably good, strong reporting culture within the organisation. People feel comfortable to report and are reporting a wide spectrum of different events and different things out there. And it's coming from our frontline staff, from our supervisors, and from our station management teams as well. So the reports are accessible, the reporting channels are accessible to all of every single employee within the organisation has the opportunity to click a link, scan a QR code, depending on where they're at within the organisation, download an app to be able to submit those various different report types. And then, of course, you then run into the higher level of reporting. So, the actual incidents themselves. What we typically see is a lot of the hazard reports and the recognition reports actually come from frontline staff. That when we get more serious into kind of incidents with injuries or aircraft damages or loading, weight and balance type incidents, whilst they still do come from the frontline staff, typically it will be a supervisor that's reporting that. The frontline staff member will have a conversation with the supervisor, highlight it, and typically that will come through the supervisor, just because it's that higher level of incident report. So then they're obviously then reported into the system. So, and essentially that's for us, that's around about 1,000 reports a month that kind of meet that incident. So there's some kind of consequence, whether it be a small injury, a hazardous injury, a minor aircraft damage, a hazardous aircraft damage, weight and balance, cargo issues, dangerous goods, loading, all of those kind of, right across the board of what you'd expect to see within the scope of the regulation. So we're hitting about 110,000. Accessibility to reporting is, we've opened it up to every single employee. And actually we encourage not just employees to submit reports as well. So through QR codes and links to the system, anyone that comes into contact with Swissport can scan a QR code and submit a report anonymously. So it's kind of wide and far reaching in terms of how that reporting works. In terms of channels and how that's done, so we obviously have a centralized management system for that, reporting system. We've just gone through a transition. We've moved away. We had an in-house system that we used for many years, and we've just moved to more of an enterprise risk system, which not only does reporting for us, it does our quality pieces as well. So our auditing, our risk management, our inspection programs. So it's in one integrated system, which is great because it means we can break down the silos between, occurrence reporting and audits, and risk. So from that perspective, we're not just looking at through the lens of reporting, we can bring those other channels in as well. So it's a fairly significant safety management system. We rolled it out in January. We went live across all the regions for reporting, which is going well. And early indications are that reporting has increased, which is great.
It is great. Absolutely. So we would always encourage actually to be proud that you have a lot of reports. That's something to be proud of because it's a good indicator. Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And that really kind of factors into that just culture piece as well. When events occur, when events occurred, obviously you need to follow up with the investigations and that side of things. But people need to be able to feel that they can report and they're not being inappropriately punished or sanctioned for those errors and mistakes, etc. And so when we introduced our new system, part of that investigation process or a big part of that investigation process was around the accountability review. So we included the accountability review in the investigation piece to ensure that regions, stations, countries, etc., are applying the same rules and framework around that accountability review. So it's the same terminology, same questions, same way you step through that investigation screen for every investigator that completes it within our organisation. So it gives us more consistency around that accountability review as well, which kind of further supports the ensuring that we are being a just culture. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Peter. So what I hear is that you have a very wide reporting accessibility, which not only includes your employees, but actually goes beyond the staff that are working for you. So even suppliers, anybody that comes into contact with Swissport, that's the word you use, can launch such a report via a QR code, a little bit similar to what we have here with Slido on our screens. So that is of course, lowering the entry barrier. And yes, the number of reports is quite impressive. Now, I would like to try and understand a little bit before I will ask you on how you then submit the reports to the competent authority. Just trying to understand a little bit what you mean when you talk about traceability, because you said you have a new system now that allows you, and that was probably quite hard to move from such a big system with so many occurrences into a new system that allows you to better use the data that you get, the occurrences, to then be able to trace back the audits that you do as a result and the lessons learned. So you close the loop with the occurrence, and maybe even with the person that raised the occurrence in the first place. So what happened to my report? Is this something that a normal employee would be able to understand what happened to his or her report that goes into the system, and then is able to understand what happened with that report at the end?
Yeah, so once the report's been submitted, so if I kind of take you through the journey or the life cycle of the report. So, frontline staff or supervisor would submit that report. The first step in that process, then it goes through to our entity safety teams. So our entity safety teams are trained people that know how to classify reports. The system itself automatically calculates our severity for us, so that once we've determined what type of event it is, the system will then allocate the severity, and it will also allocate the requirement for an investigation or not. Obviously, with over 100,000 reports a year, it's not possible to investigate every single one. So we need a way of risk prioritizing what gets followed up, and there's some system logic that allows us to do that, which gives us a consistency across all of the the 200 plus stations. So it goes through that entity safety team. They will then decide if an investigation needs doing, or if the system's telling it that it definitely needs one. And that investigation's created. The investigation team will be set up, and obviously they'll go through the normal process of an investigation, looking at the, gathering the evidence, doing the analysis, creating the report, and doing the follow-up, corrective, preventative actions. As part of that process as well, we have what we call within our organisation as a one-page lesson learned. So again, built into the system, and it's basically the what, the why, and what we've done about it in a kind of a one-pager. The system produces us essentially a slide that can then be shared with, locally amongst the teams, or regionally, or at the global level. So our one-page lesson learned are used to then get that learning across to the various different stakeholders within the organisation that need to know. So getting that feedback loop. The other thing that we do as well, once that report first comes in, there's an acknowledgement that goes out to the individual, provided they weren't anonymous. But an acknowledgement that goes out to that individual to say, thanks for your report. We're looking into it, etc. So to try and encourage that initial reporting piece, that's managed through an automated response right at the beginning.
Okay, so that's very clear. So you have this feedback loop that then again is going to encourage further reporting. If people see what happens to their reports, this is definitely the way to go. Now, turning a little bit next to the process. So once you have, as an organization, you have explained very well what you're dealing with, how you're dealing with those reports. At what stage do you then get involved with your competent authority? So how do you then and what do you submit to the competent authority? I think that would be interesting to understand. And if you want to just quickly reply on this, because we're a little bit late in time, also explain to us where you see maybe a challenge in this whole reporting journey that you have as an organization, inside your organization, but also in the context of your contacts with the competent authority.
Sure. Yeah. So the initial reports to the authorities, to meet the initial reporting requirements, are obviously much sooner than that investigation piece. So once the report comes in, that entity safety team does that initial classification and review. At that point, if the entity safety teams within the countries believe that it's reportable to the national authority or through to the EASA reporting protocols, then they would then at the moment it's a manual process to go in and update the website and to report to the national authorities. Going forward within our system development, we're working with our vendor to create an automated process that would then directly feed into the EASA database directly. So that's a piece of work that's ongoing at the moment. We should have it completed in the next quarter or so.
Okay.
That's then going to automate that process a lot more. In terms of challenges and that, one of the challenges at the moment is that the double reporting, so reporting it into our own system, and then someone having to then go and report it in manually through the web portals or whatever. Obviously that's takes time and effort. The options and the field availability is slightly different on both. Our reporting forms are different to what the the national requirement reporting or the EASA reporting forms. So it takes time and familiarity for the stations, countries that are pushing those reports through. So that's certainly one challenge. With the integration we're doing, that should ease that burden, because obviously it will just be reporting into one system. It will then, in the back end, there's many mandatory fields required, quite a lot of which aren't necessarily applicable to ground handlers.
Yes.
So we'll be able to not necessarily have to put those fields on the frontline staff or the reporting staff. We can then auto populate them in the back end to make sure we're meeting the mandatory field requirements. But if it's not relevant to us as an organisation, then obviously there's no benefit having it on our actual form just for the sake of having it on the form. So that will also help that piece as well. And I guess there are, in terms of other challenges, I think each of the countries, the national regulators, have their own take on the requirements and what flavours of what they're interested in. Some authorities are interested in some different types of reports than other authorities. So we see a disparity between, reporting into different countries, what particular type of events they're interested in. Some want a lot more than others. So that's a challenge for us because we don't have that consistency throughout Europe in terms of actual reporting requirements. And I think there was a point made on in an earlier part about the real challenge really is around that what could potentially cause harm. So it's then it's a bit of a grey area, in terms of how people interpret the potential outcome. The hole in the side of an aeroplane or well, that's very easy. Absolutely meets the reporting requirements 100%. It's that grey area where there's that potential that I think is probably something that could either be improved through more detail in the regulation, or clearer guidance maybe. So I think that's probably one of the bigger area of challenges, is the consistency between the countries, and then the understanding and interpretation from individuals, which we try and manage through training. But obviously it's still it's still a, you know, if you ask 10 different people, you know, what the potential outcome can be, you'll get 10 different answers. So it's the consistency in applying some of those rules.
Thank you. That was super interesting, also addressing the challenges. So it's the interface, of course, of your system. Now you still require a manual inputting, which of course requires not only labor, but also people trying to sort the system and trying to understand how this interface works with the competent authority system. You mentioned that the generalized form contains a lot of elements that are not relevant to ground handling at all. And so this is sort of confusing for a ground handling expert if all of a sudden you're confronted with a form that has things in there that are not relevant for ground handling at all. And you also highlighted the different interpretation by member states and specifically this whole thing about how to assess the potential outcome, that of course it depends on different perceptions and different approaches and different priorities in different member states, which then makes it difficult for you as a global organization to train your people back at the stations to respond to those different requests from different member states. I think that was all very clear. Thank you very much, Peter. This experience from a practitioner is super welcome for us because the system will not work without your organization and the people in your organization trying to feed it. So if it's too complicated, if it has things that are not relevant, we need to be able to filter that out and make it as easy as possible for you to provide your data into the system. So that was really helpful. I'd like now to hand over to my colleague Adina for the rest of the moderation of the panel when we're talking about the competent authorities. Over to you, Adina.
So we've seen, and Peter has explained how a report is born. So the report has been generated. What is the next phase? The next phase is when the report reaches the system and the competent authority is notified that a report has been submitted in their country. And the next phase of this panel discussion is going to focus on what do the competent authorities do with the report, what are the next steps that they take, and any advice that will come from the competent authorities. And I'd like now to give the floor to Joe and then later on to Barbara, but I will start with Joe. So Joe, what do you do when you are notified that you have received that a new ground handling report has been submitted to Belgian competent authority?
Good afternoon. So basically, and I would like to refer to your presentation that you give with the flow chart of the flow of reports that are done. There are two basic steps. The first steps when an occurrence arrives at the national authorities, there is a review done by our safety managers on GDPR level, removal of names, risk level check if all fields, mandatory fields are updated, etc. So that's the first check that is done, but also very important, and as part of the EASA system, for the same occurrence, the reports are joined together. So they are linked together as a package for us. And basically, that's the second step. So we are the inspectors. We're going to review the results, the reports that are coming up in the updated, cleaned up reports, basically. So we're going to start with a quality check. We're going to check if all information is listed and if all parties have reported the occurrence. So what we do from Belgium, we start a communication. If a report is missing, we get in contact with the industry and send out a reminder. Or the next step could be that we make an audit finding. So a lot of companies already know that if something happens, that they have to report it. If they miss the reporting, that they will have a telephone from our side as a reminder to report the occurrence. We also do a quality check to see if all fields are updated as part of the 72 hours, but also the 3 months. So what we check is not only is the occurrence reported, but also the actions taken, the preventive actions, the corrective actions, the review of the report analysis done by the company. So we do a check on that as well, and we start a communication with the company if we got additional questions on certain occurrences. Also, maybe interesting to highlight is that the reporting of occurrences is also linked to some actions, some safety actions of our Belgian safety plan. It's like Peter already mentioned, the high amount of quality. So the number of the number of occurrence reporting is one of the safety indicators. And we see a very big, large improvement, and that's the large quantity of occurrences reports that arrive at the authorities, and we see a good way of working in that direction. Another part is a specific safety indicator is damages to the aircraft. Also mentioned by Peter, the damage on the aircraft is a critical issue. Also, the next steps that have to be taken, a technical assessment, etc. And we double check, is the reporting done correctly? Are the procedures respected, etc., to have a good view on the reporting. So to summarize, 2 steps: internal review by our safety managers, and then our safety inspectors that use the data, that review the data and use the data in the future for audits. So basically, those are the 2 steps of the occurrences flow at the national authority.
Thank you, Joe. So it's important to highlight here that the work of the competent authority is also significant. So it's not just like, yeah, we have noticed that, we will take it into account when we do the oversight or whatever, and then we store it there and we forget about it. And it's not just one person within a competent authority that is involved in the processing of the safety reports. It could be a whole team, it could be a few persons, but it's usually more than just one. And I will get back to you probably to go a little deeper into that. I have also a question to Barbara. Besides, so Barbara, over to you. Is there anything that you would like to what Joe has mentioned? Otherwise, I will ask you the next question.
No, I think Joe really did a good presentation on how the reports are coming in and all that work the authority has to do. I mean, I really have respect for my colleagues who have to go through all the reports. They check for the quality that the fields are filled in, that have to, and and also evaluate them on our risk model that we have. And maybe just a little bit shout out to handling agents here. If you do not have that interface machine to EASA yet, do open an organization account. It'll make your life so much easier, and ours as well, because then your authority will have prepared a form. Ours is ground handling and dangerous goods together. I'm not sure about other authorities. So you will only have the fields in there that you need. If you just go in and just open up a report manually, you'll have, I don't know how many fields that you can't use, or you have no idea on what the information would be. And here you just have those fields you need as a handling agent. And sometimes you can also put in unknown if you don't have the information. So this is really easier for you, it's easier for us. Because then I think the next one is about the ECR. Adina?
Yes, actually, that's what I wanted to ask you, because I don't know how eCares works. I only have a very broad overview of what ECR contains. These are 2 different concepts. These are 2 different things. One thing is the eCares, the other thing is ECR. eCares, in my understanding, is just the interface. It's the IT platform, the IT interface, but the big database is the ECR, which is the European Central Repository. And we have different regulations that also regulate this part. But what I don't know exactly is, and now please try to explain to me, and maybe just isn't only me, there may be some other people in our audience today who would like to know whether is it the competent authority that has to do something for this report to get to ECR, or is this something that the organization can do itself? How much are you competent authorities involved in this step in which the report has been generated and then eventually the report is stored in the ECR? What happens in between?
I had to ask my colleagues as well, because as an inspector, I have to do with acres,
Okay.
not with the ECR. So the acres is the platform that you report into, and it is the one I look at as well. My colleagues, when they do all those quality checks, they then, from there, it goes into the, once they've done that, they can feed it into the ECR. At FOC, I've been informed that it's an automatic thing overnight. It's a batch and it goes into the ECR. It can also be done manually. Depends on the authority how they do it. So you have more or less the same fields. And what our authority can do, or our department, I can't do that, is they can also see reports from other authorities, although just limited information. Our safety and risk management department, they already take out a lot of information when they put everything into eCare so I can see it. They take out all the names, for example, if somebody left them in there by mistake. So, and then in the ECR, you can't see, for example, the original report. We checked it out. We can see the narrative, but not all the history, the corrective actions they put in, etc. We can't see that.
I see.
So yeah, so it is, I think, for us as the ground handling agents and us, the inspectors, and I think Sarah might know more about that, we don't even need to know about that. I would say I didn't know much about that either before. I knew that I thought there is the method that we can see something from other countries as well, but it's very restricted, and it's not that the whole authority can look into it. It's also restricted to certain people.
Yeah,
I think that's the most one has to know. We don't really use it, and the ECR has the same. They call it the surfacing. It looks like ACARES. ECARES.
So the industry
slightly different fields, but this industry doesn't need it.
Yeah.
Or has no access to it.
Yeah.
So the industry feeds the data into the platform, and it's like Barbara said, we are the end users to use the data for other tasks that we have to do as a ground handling inspector. But it's not just ground handling that uses the eCash platform or the ECR. It's every department within an authority that's got access as to use the data that is transferred, collected in the ECR. And basically, Barbara and I, we are the end users of that platform. We see the final results.
Understood. Thank you very much, Sarah.
And we have to update it, or we have to verify what Joe already said. We have to check, did they report it within 72 hours? Is the intermediate or the follow-up coming within 1 month, the final within 3 months? That's what we check for. Do they not stay on initial notification and then the handling agent, oh no, I don't have to do anything, and they leave it on initial notification instead of closing it, for example. So this is things that we as the inspectors would look at or should look at.
Understood. Thank you very much, Barbara. Sarah, I think you
Yeah,
had something.
it's slightly, the member states have slightly different approaches to this. Most, from what I've seen from my inspections, is that most countries have their own database into which their the ECAS, the reports come into. There's usually then a front end sort of desk where they attribute it then to different domains. And then the respective focal point in the domain, say air ops or airdrome or ground handling, or maybe sometimes it's joint domains together, they would then treat these reports as they have come in and sort of do that first. Has it been complete? They complete fields which have not been completed. They make sure that the mandatory fields are completed. Ideally, of course, sometimes there's so many in one area that you can't be treating all of them at the same time, but that definitely incident level, serious incident, would be fully first treated by the domain expert that has been given that report. And then within a certain time frame, they have to upload it then into the ECR, into the common database. Yeah, and that is what she meant by either daily or nightly. Others have a different rhythm of every 2 weeks or weekly or monthly, and that's why we see sometimes also delays in the reports. And let's say the more problematic reports sometimes even take longer because they are really being fully analyzed, treated, and the follow-up is first done, and is the corrective action already determined and so forth, and then they would be updated. So we have always a delay of minimum 1 month or in worst case 2 to 3 months. At the end of 1 year, we have maybe up to end of February or beginning of March, by which time we then get all the December data into the ECR. Yeah, so that's because there's a lot of activity first at the CAA level.
Understood. Thank you very much for this clarification. I think that it's safe now to say that there's more to discuss about
Absolutely.
the e-cares and ECR. So what I would propose, because I think that we can already identify the need to dive deeper and to ask for the involvement of some more colleagues from EASA who are actually working deeply with e-cares, and they are able to provide more information. So stay tuned. We will also organize another webinar. I don't know if this is going to be the next one, but anyway, within this transition period that we still have, so we're going to have another webinar in which we are going to focus more on e-cares itself, maybe even with some examples, maybe even to talk more about machine-to-machine interfacing, and these things that I'm sure that are of interest for most of you in the audience. So this is not over yet. This was just for me to make the introduction into this. To me, it's an unknown world. To you, most probably, it's much more. You are already familiar with it. You are using it on a regular basis. So we will discuss a little more, maybe more about this in the next webinar. Coming back to what you were mentioning before, Joe, about this use that the competent authority has or is applying to the reports, this feedback loop. I'm very interested in this feedback loop because from the previous input that we had when we discussed with the industry during the drafting of the regulations, we identified that this could be a potential lack of motivation for organizations to report because nothing gets back to them. And you were mentioning that you are using those reports when you do the oversight. Now we know that not all the member states have a ground handling regulation or safety ground handling regulation today, which means that nothing gets back to the reporters because there is no direct interaction between the competent authority and the ground handling organization that submits a report, generates a report. So how, I would like you to give us a little more detail because I'm also aware of the time, and I would also like to move on to the next part of our discussion. Tell us about how you're using, or to which extent you are using the reports when you do the oversight, but also it could be other activities that the competent authority is doing, not necessarily linked to oversight, but maybe to safety promotion. I don't know. How are you using this information that you get from the reports to feed back to the organizations that report?
Yeah. So as for the feedback itself, at this moment, our focus is on our Belgian safety plan. So for the statistics, determining the indicators, the safety indicators, etc., that is the most important task at this moment in relation to the feedback to the industry. But at this moment, we've got a lot of support from the aerodromes as well that send out safety letters, safety bulletins in relation also to ground handling occurrences that happen as well, as they have to report to the aerodrome safety management as well. So those are two examples of feedback loops that are given to the industry now. But what we do with the info as well, we would link it to our oversight activities that we do, or inspections or audits. And there we do two tasks. The first task is to check, based on the regulation, the EU 376/2014, the procedure of reporting. If occurrences are reported, if the quality is of a high level, if just culture is respected and implemented in a company. So that section is audited. We've got some audit questions in relation to that part, as for the occurrence follow-up. But we also use the data of the occurrences as part of the safety management system, but also as part of the overhaul of the ground support equipment at this moment. So if we do notice a lot of reports in relation to equipment that's with failing brakes, for example, that damages aircraft, it's a trigger for us as well to focus on the maintenance or the usage, the operation of that equipment. So basically, data feedback by safety bulletins, supported by the aerodromes, as for the Belgian safety plan, but also an active role in or inspector role that we use the data as a trigger, as a detailed example to focus on during inspections and audits. So it's very useful data for us, and also to double check if the preventive actions that are listed in EASA by the industry are implemented. It's very useful data. And it also shows the level, the maturity of the safety management system. If you manage your occurrences, that's a good indication that you've got a good safety management system to manage the risks related to your activities.
Absolutely. This is highlighting actually the lessons learned and how the system can be improved. Thank you very much, Joe. Moving on to the next step in the journey of the safety reports. So the competent authorities have cleaned it up, have made sure that the report is into the ECR. What next? Because EASA also has a role in what we do about the safety reports. And I would say that's also not a very little role, on the contrary. And here is why we have Sarah in the room, because Sarah can give us a lot of information and can explain what happens to the reports once they are in ECR, and what EASA is doing with safety reports. Over to you, Sarah.
Okay, thank you very much, Adina. I apologize already ahead of time if I'm getting a little legalistic in the opening again. But we do have a certain role, and I think it's worthwhile to just say that what's the role of EASA. So in the EASA basic regulation, we have the Article 6 that asks EASA to make a European plan for aviation safety. And in that plan, it should identify the main safety risks affecting the European aviation safety system and set out necessary actions to mitigate those risks. And so definitely EASA has now then this role that to have a hazard log, safety risk log, and to document these risks in a safety risk portfolio that's explicitly mentioned in the legislation. So what does it mean? That means that as part of its EU SRM process, so that means it needs to identify what's bothering, what is the problems at the EU level. The SRM system and process has to be undertaken. And the ECR plays a big role then as an input into the identification of the EU level safety issues. So that is the step that you see here as step number 1, which is first of all looking at the raw data, at the incoming reports, at occurrences that we've had, at accident and incidents that we've had, and then to see if there's commonalities which require or which actually tell a story of a weakness of the system or of the rules or of the different roles and actors. So then, if we have certain suggestions for that, we have a fact sheet that needs to be fulfilled, and we have certain panels which need to agree with that the how the risk manager sees these risks and whether or not it actually qualifies to become a European risk. Now, just to maybe show you a little bit what are the different sources of safety intelligence that we have, to show you that we are basing ourselves very much on the ECR and on the reports and occurrences that we have, but not just. We have, other than that input, we have safety recommendations, which are coming from the investigations by the safety investigation authorities. And we have even a tool in how to search for safety recommendations, and maybe they are associated to risks that are coming through. And then we can already see that it's been pointed out to us that there is something, and the ECR data now supports that. So we might have a growing body of evidence that there is a European level risk. Then we have the database of aviation safety networks, the Cerium, where we have certain industry players which are following up on incident and occurrences and accidents. We have the network of aviation safety analysts, which is this famous NOAA. Whenever you hear us say the word NOAA, we mean network of aviation safety analysts. That is the body that's foreseen by the 376, where EASA, together with the Commission, is co-chairing a get-together of safety analysts 3 times a year or 4 times a year, where we are sharing information and incoming trends, and then to see how we handle them and how we actually also are dealing with it, and how to improve retrieval of information from the e-cares as well, because that's a huge challenge, because there's so many different steps and players that are allowed to give input into the ECR and into the reports, that we need to make sure that the data in there is the best quality that we can have. And that the feedback after investigations, for example, is also fed back into the reports, because that's a challenge between CIAs and competent authorities. Now, we also have EASA technical bodies and member states advisory bodies that can give us information. We have potentially the Data for Safety program that can conduct director studies, but at this moment right now, we're having a limited members of the Data for Safety program. Certain member states are not yet fully members there. So there's sort of a more privileged access to data and cleaned up data. So because the Data for Safety program, for example, has a major activity on using AI to improve on the data quality, which by manual labor you could not do yourself, but it actually fills fields that have been forgotten or that have been wrongly filled in, because we see this quite a bit. Now, there's also intelligence derived from the operational departments engaged in the organization oversight, where EASA is the competent authority. So that's not our area, because we are not competent authority in this area. But we have more the input from intelligence derived from the EASA operational departments engaged in EASA standardization of the member states. So we have potentially certain systemic problems or factual problems that we get fed back from units such as ULIAS or the Air Ops that can tell us about certain trends. And then we have also intelligence received from foreign authorities, EASA bilateral partners, International Industry Association. For example, we on a regular basis, we look at what IATA is having as their safety issues, and we try to see how they are defining them. And last but not least, we have, of course, the confidential safety reporting, the famous CRS reports, whistleblowing reports, which can be done directly to EASA when, let's just say, when people have not trusted their own non-punitive culture in their own country, or they want to circumvent the CAAs of their own country, but they wanted to go directly to EASA, which may be the case, particularly. Of course, small countries are always a challenge because everybody knows each other, and it's more easy to trace where a complaint can be coming from. So, and people might justly or unjustifiably be worried. So we have that possibility. And then there is the, what we call, it's a little bit a misnomer, the candidate issue identification form from the EASA Pro internet website, where you can raise an issue that can be a suggestion as to better rulemaking. It can be a suggestion as to a new safety risk that is being pointed out, but that's also what we have. Let's go to the next slide. We have, and I don't want to go too deeply into this, but if you, in the beginning of the EASA work with the data coming from the ECR and with work of the with industry bodies, we had been a bit less directed as to what we define as a European safety issue. Now, in the beginning of 2025, we developed work instructions as to how across domains safety issues need to be defined. And we have here certain criteria which are very important as to when something is elevated to a European level. So I think this might be something that people might later on familiarize themselves when we get the slides, when they get the slides. And if someone from the audience or from the panelists wants to work with the EASA in the future on a industry body to look at safety issues, that would be the criteria that we'd have to apply since beginning of last year. And these are also what we now have to assess the current safety issues under. Safety issues in general, once they're being defined and once they have been accepted by the different panels here inside the EASA, these safety issues would enter the safety risk portfolio and be described in this regular yearly EPAS that we have. You might recall that we have, up to now, we've had EPAS number 1, number 2, and 3. Number 1 is the strategic goals that are being described and the overall safety strategy, whereas the mitigation actions are described in volume 2 and the safety risks associated to the things that that are being mitigated there in the volume 3. Ideally, of course, we also monitor the safety performance with the annual safety review, but there is not this a clear line link between what was done and how it's now assessed, because performance assessment is hard. It's a harder job to be doing. So the ASR is basically then the outcome of accident and serious incidents that we see domain per domain and aircraft type by aircraft type. So that's definitely an area that we need to improve on in the overall SRM process of the EU, how to measure our performance better against the mitigation actions that we have in our plan. So I think we might not have the time to go into what we have currently in the portfolio, or do you want me to go into this? Because the portfolio as it was, or as it is right now, is still based on what was input in the years 2021 or before 2021, and we now have, of course, the new ground handling rules, and we also have the lived experience of the airdrome rules since 2018. So, and on top of it, these safety issues were defined using the old way of having defined safety issues. But definitely we are trying to now subject these 26 safety issues, which we currently still have. We want to clean them up vis-a-vis the safety issue criteria that we have developed. And on top of it, we need to make sure that we are mapping what is already taken care of by the upcoming ground handling rules, so that we move those issues. If I could come back to this famous, this cycle, exactly, because all of the work that Adina did with the ground handling roadmap was, of course, she had a defined programmed action, step 3, and she was in the process of preparing her rules. Safety issues had been defined before in step 1, and we were then holding back in assessing the safety issues because we had already actions planned, which was the ground handling roadmap. Then when she finished her action, the rules are now out, but the implementation takes 3 years. So the safety issues that we had previously found for the ground handling area should be moved to the implement point, because they are being in the process of being implemented, and then they can be moving on to monitor stage later on if these rules are now hitting the targets that they should be hitting. But at the same time, you of course have to clean up the safety issues that were not described in the way that we want to have them described. Okay, so that's the actions that are currently going on. Yeah, so the most important list here, this is the sub-list of the 10 items which we have, the 15 items which we still have in hazard in a context. These are those here. And I highlighted here now the 1026, for example. This is a classic example of something where we have plenty of airdrome rules and ground handling rules already in the area, yet the item is still in assess queued. So that doesn't make sense, because both the airdrome rules and the ground handling rules cover this area very well. It describes the whole phase also of parking and positioning. So it's not very, it's too coarse, so to speak, and it's already being taken care of by the rules that are being implemented at the moment. So that's an item that doesn't make sense to be waiting for it being assessed. No, it's rather already being implemented as now that we have the rules. So that's an example there. Yeah, so basically that's what I wanted to say, that we go through this process now of taking the old portfolio, making sure that we are subjecting them to the new work instructions, see if what needs to be removed and what needs to be put into already being implemented. And if there is an item that was not very well defined, however, links up to a very topical issue, such as the transportation of dangerous goods and lithium batteries, then we probably will use that item and redefine it and hone it down to the real problem that we're seeing. Because the item on the dangerous goods, for example, is very general. It talks about the handling and loading of dangerous goods as such. So that's too much of a topic. We need to really see what is the problem that we are seeing with the dangerous goods and particularly in the lithium batteries. So that we would be redefining it and then putting it into the assess queue still. So that's what basically the work that we're doing. That will take still another a year or so, I would say. But you can see this what we will be doing in this area is also described in chapter 11 of the EPAS 26, and we'll repeat that chapter pretty much in the next version of the EPAS volume 3, because this work takes longer to be going through the different steps of accepting or removing safety items.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sarah, this is and this is for the audience to know just the tip of the iceberg, which actually indicates how much work there is to do at aggregation level and identification of the risks and scoring those risks. Because we are very late, I would like us to move to the next part of our panel discussion, and we are now moving into the time allocated for the questions and answers. I apologize for that in advance, but I don't want us to finish discussing about these things without talking about one of the most important elements of why we are all here today. That's the reporting culture, and how we can do, or what we can do, all of us, regulators, competent authorities, ground handling organizations, individuals, to improve the reporting culture compared to what we have today, how we can do things better. I only want to show you, to open the last part of the discussion, one slide now, just for you to understand what I'm talking about. This is what we had published in the EASA opinion proposing a new ground handling regulation. That was in 2023, at the end of 2023. Look at these two pie charts. The first pie chart indicates which are the types of the entities that report events in ground handling. A big chunk, aircraft operator, another big chunk, ANSPs, a slight smaller chunk, aerodrome operator, quite a big one of unidentified organizations, 4% ground handling service providers. That was the situation back in 2023. And the reporting period that we analyzed was between 2015 and 2023. The situation has improved today, I have to say. But look also at the other pie chart on the right-hand side. That big blue part represents the number of reporting in only one country of the EASA member states out of the 31 EASA member states that we have. What did that country do to have such a good reporting level? What tricks can that country teach us? This pie chart doesn't tell which country that is, but that country is still at one of the probably top 3 or top 5 best reporting countries, or countries where the highest number of reports still occurs today. And okay, there is a difference in 3 years between 2023 and 2026, but this country is still one of the top reporting countries in Europe right now. And now this is just to open the discussion, and because the representative of that country is in this room with us today, in the virtual room, Yannick, welcome. And I will give you the floor because you have some tricks in your sleeve to tell us and the audience what France is doing so well that you have such a high number of reports in Europe and in ground handling also. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Adina, and hello, everyone. So my name is Yannick de France. I work for the French Competent Authority. And indeed, in France, we have a significant number of safety occurrence reports. So I think it's around 100,000 a year. So for that, we have two major contributors, which are DSNA, so the national ANSP, and Air France, of course, the national airline. So just to clarify, this number of 100,000 refers to the number of reports and not to individual events. So because the same event can be reported by different organizations. So we can have, for example, 2 or 3 different reports for one single event. So this is the amount of notification of reports and not of events. But when it comes specifically to ground handling, we already have indeed quite interesting figures with around 30,000 reports submitted every year by ground handling organizations. So from those numbers, I can tell that Air France, which is also a ground handler for his own purposes, Air France is one of the major contributors too for ground handling events. But still, we are starting from a very solid baseline. And to answer your question, I will try to explain why. So first, I would really like to insist on the fact that reporting culture is really essential for us because it is what allows us to identify the main safety risk at national level. And based on that, we can implement an effective risk-based oversight. We can keep our national risk matrix up to date. We can identify the right safety promotion actions. And ultimately, all this help operators to improve safety. So yes, a strong reporting culture is really the first starting point of continuous safety improvement. And I would like to highlight a few key elements about our approach to oversight in France when it comes to safety reporting. So first, we have a dedicated and quite substantial organization for safety performance monitoring in France. We have a department which is called Safety Assessment and Analysis Division. with around 15 staff members. So it's quite a huge division. And they are responsible for driving the state safety plan, organizing thematic workshop for operators, publishing guidance materials, and also monitoring safety occurrences at national level. So, for example, on a weekly basis, teams from this division are sampling ECARES database by randomly selecting one given day and reviewing all reported occurrences from that day, looking for any noteworthy cases. So this way of organization clearly reflects our intention to treat occurrence reporting as a key pillar of our safety oversight. So naturally, we have the same mindset for the audit approach. So the event reporting is systematically reviewed and explored deeply during each audit, so that to ensure that operators have in place an effective reporting and analysis processes to improve their safety performance. So we also hold dedicated thematic meetings with our major operators on a regular basis, so every 3 or 4 months, where we challenge them on their analysis, we challenge them on their actions they've taken, and we ask for evidences of implementation. So this is for the oversight actions, but we also have safety promotion actions. And more specifically on ground handling, we have developed several initiatives. So, for example, we have produced short video clips covering different topics, such as how to respect cargo on landing sequences, how handle refueling operation, aircraft damage, and many more topics. So those video clips are really useful for the organization for their internal promotion and to have the most efficient way to talk with their own personnel. We also publish paper bulletins that are called tarmac, each of which focuses on a specific safety topic. So, for example, we have a really interesting tarmac on refueling operation and the risk of fire. So the goal of those tarmac bulletin is to explain the key risks of the selected topic by providing many real-life occurrence reports. So of course we anonymize the reports, but we take them to illustrate the issues and illustrate what we want to deal with. So to conclude, all these actions goals are to build a strong safety culture together with the operator. So we want them to understand that we are working with them, that the reporting are also helping us and also helping them, in order to improve their safety. And it helps us ensuring that occurrence reporting brings concrete safety improvement on the ground. It's not just paper, it's not just information going into a black box, but there are concrete improvements thanks to the reporting.
Very good points, Yannick. Thank you very much. So to highlight communication, going back to the reporter to let them know what you're doing, for them to understand that the sending a report isn't being sent to a black hole and nothing gets back from there, but it gets back a safety benefit that they can further use, and that's extremely important. And you still remain, as France still remains one of the top reporting countries after all. I think I'm not wrong. We have some other new champions, good performers. Sarah, do you mind if we skip the parts, because I know that you had some more parts on the data, but I'm afraid that we are running out of time really. But this is a clear indicator that the topic is so big and so important that it clearly deserves more discussions about that.
Yeah.
May I conclude by inviting you just to give, I don't know, one piece of advice as a conclusion of how we can, to conclude our discussion. Would you give one piece of advice to our audience today before we move to the questions and answers on how you would what recommendations or lessons learned would you be able to share, would you like to share with our audience about how to make the reporting culture even better, how to improve that? Could you think of one thing, one advice, one lesson learned that you would like to share with your audience today? And then we move to the questions and answers. Can I start with, I don't know, I will start with Peter. Is that okay to start with you? What would you recommend to our audience to do in order to improve the reporting culture within an organization?
And so I would say that the biggest, or one of the key points is around kind of walking the walk. It's about that accountability review piece. You know, it's you can break a reporting culture very easily by not following your own guidelines, principles, processes around reporting. So, you know, when incidents happen, we get hungry for blame, unfortunately. We get pressure from airlines to remove people from our operations. But in doing so, you know, if it's errors and mistakes, don't deviate from, you know, coach, counsel, train, but leave it at that. So that would be my biggest thing. It takes seconds to break that trust. It takes years to build it.
Yeah, indeed, that's very important. Thank you very much, Peter. Accountability, and don't break your principles. Encourage people to stay true to this just culture principle. Thank you, Peter. Can I move back then to Yanni? What would be your recommendation to our audience today?
That's not an easy question, because I think that everyone has to appropriate themselves the way to organize. So there is not one way to do there. When it comes to a safety management system, there are many ways to organize, to of course comply to regulation, but also to have an efficient system. And I think that for safety report it's the same. So we have to find the tools, to find the talks with our personnel that will really talk to them. It's not about one miracle solution that everyone can take, and then it's easy for everyone. So you really have to explore deeply what is going on your organization, to understand why maybe at some point there are some difficulties, and to be able to find your solution and your way to handle this.
Good point. So find your own way, know your organization, know what it ticks, what it makes it tick for you, and apply those things in order to improve the reporting and the safety culture. Thank you, Yanni. Now I'm moving on round our screen and your view. I'm moving to Joe. What would your recommendation be, Joe?
Yes, so my recommendation is basically the website of eCares. It's not just a reporting platform, but there's also very useful information of what to report and how to report. So there's a section, why reporting, the mission, the vision. So there's very useful information on the website, aviation reporting as well. So I would like to encourage the companies to go to the website, not just to the reporting section, but also to the other sections, to find out very useful information in relation to the existing regulation of reporting and follow-up. And then I would like to follow Yannick on the comments that he has made. So he has highlighted one occurrence with different reports. I would like to point out the responsibility of the ground handlers. Now they have to. It's a must that they have to report as well. It's not just the aerodrome who has seen or is involved with an error, with an occurrence, but if a ground handler is part of it as well, they have to report it as well. So I would like to highlight the responsibility of the industry as well. And what we do, and that's also mentioned by Yannick, the tools. So we are in communication with the industry, and we are supporting them with an organizational login via our specialists, but also manual how to use the reporting platform. So we would like to support them. We cannot do the job for them. They have to do it, but we'd like to make it easier with the tools that Yannick has mentioned, to provide them tools to use the platform. But the first most important part is the aviation reporting website. Check it out. Check why safety reporting, and you will find some very useful information.
Very good and very clear pieces of advice. Thank you, Joe. And we also have useful information about reporting on the EASA website, but I don't remember exactly the name of it. But if you go on the EASA webpage, you will find the safety reporting or safety aviation reporting, something like that. And it also provides links to the eCares page and more detailed information. Thank you, Joe. And Barbara, last but not least, your recommendation, please.
I think my recommendation is contact your authorities. Whatever is not clear when you look at the aviation reporting page, as Joe mentioned, and so go and ask. I'm sure all authorities will be happy to support you. And I can't talk to about any other authorities, but I think a lot will have a template for ground handling agents. So you don't have to go through all those fields that are not mandatory for you. They can explain it to you. They can, depending on, I'm sure they can do some training. If the country is too big and too many questions, maybe they can do webinars, whatever. Also as part now of the introduction of the new regulation. Because there are still some tweaks and this and that that's different from one country to the next. So get the information on the EASA aviation reporting page, and then contact your authority about organization account, for example. You also might have it on their internet sites. You can set it up, but then if you want to know how best to use it and who should have administrative rights, who not, it's best to contact your authority. I think they should also be able to put you at ease about just culture, about information they take out of the reports, even if you leave it in by mistake. We get sometimes anonymous reports and they put in the data. So yeah, so I think that should work well.
Contact your competent authority. They can give you a lot of advice and guidance, and they can also teach you tricks. So that's another very useful piece of advice. Thank you, Barbara. This discussion is not over. Okay, we have very little time for the questions and answers. The answers will be published. I know that we are late also with the previous questions. We promise to provide answers also to them. Thank you very much to our panelists. Let's see what questions we have and what question jumps in first.
Yes, I can support this part of the discussion here. So we have a question that has received the highest number of likes. 25 of you have said this is a good question. And the question is the following. Please cover and discuss the integration and exchange of the safety reporting with air operators and aerodrome operators. Actually, there were several questions here about what to do if you have reports from air operators and aerodrome operators, and probably also ground handling organizations. So what about integration and exchange of safety reporting when they come from different stakeholders, air operators, aerodromes, or ground handling? Anybody would like to answer that question from the panelists? I look at you. If you don't feel you want to answer this question, I'll give it here to the floor of EASA. Anybody from the panelists?
I think I could.
Yes, please, Barbara.
now if it works and we get your reports as well, ground handling agents, sorry, then we might have reports, yes, from a handling agent, airline, aerodrome, ANSP, or whoever. They will be bundled together. I think Joe mentioned that before. And we will have one identifier, for example, but all under one number, and we see who reported what, which gives us a better, a clearer picture of what really happened. They don't always say the same thing. So I think there's no information sharing, if that was the question here, from us going out to an operator or an aerodrome. It's just for us inside. And yeah, some airlines, as mentioned before, they have one incident and 5 reports.
Yes.
And those things can happen.
But what you're saying, Barbara, is that having 5 reports on the same incident is actually not a bad thing per se, because it gives different perspectives. And I think that addresses also some of the other questions. The second highest ranked question is, what about companies that operate both as airport operator and a ground handler as well? Do we need 2 separated reporting systems, or can we as an organization, can we integrate them into one system?
So as from the regulations point of view, there is no restriction. Important is that this organization does have a reporting system, and as far as the ground handling regulation is concerned, that this reporting system is appropriately and adequately covering the ground handling occurrences. Do you have a point of view, colleagues from the competent authorities, about this question? Does such an organization have to have separate reporting systems or not?
No, I don't think this is necessary. And having the same reporting system may be useful too, because you can monitor all your operation on every safety aspect, and it can be really useful to cross-link what happened to you as ground handlers, what happened to you as airlines. So having the same system, I think, is beneficial.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the same for here. I would like to give an example of an operator who's also a ground handler here in Belgium. So one system, they send it to us. Review is done internally by our safety management, but our safety management also decides to whom it will be sent to internally. So if it's a ground handling issue, it's sent to the ground handling section of the national authority. If it's ops, it's sent to the ops. If it's boat, it's sent to boat. So the system takes the splitting, let's say, of those 2 sections into account as well when review is done. So one system is used and it finds its way to the dedicated inspectors.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you.
The next question, and I will try to highlight it. Yes. Is there an event that would require a mandatory occurrence report? Would you expect a report from aerodrome, ground handler, and airline for the same event? I think this one we have already answered.
I think so.
That we have multiple entry sources or multiple entries. But now, can we give an example of a ground handling event that would require a mandatory reporting? Do we have an answer on this one?
We have, for example, on runway incursions and taxiway excursions, for example, we have this as a mandatory event for aerodromes and ground handlers at the same time. So that's something that would need to be mandatorily reported by different organizations if they are different and they don't have it. Yeah. So it would have to be reported, the airline as well. So, and the idea is here that these different perspectives of the different reporting entities is valuable information for the competent authority to actually find out what really happened and where was the weakness. You know.
Correct.
So
And I think that we can answer this question by thinking of the interfaces in the ground handling activities. I think those interfacing activities, operations, for example, refueling of aircraft, those could be, if an event occurs with the refueling of an aircraft, you would expect as a competent authority, please correct me if I'm wrong, Yannick and Jo and Barbara, you would expect to see 3 reports, because refueling operations is a ground handling activity where you have 3 actors: ground handling organization, the into-plane fuel provider, you have the aerodrome operator responsible for the safety on the apron during refueling, and you also have the aircraft operator with the aircraft that is being affected. So normally, probably, you would see, if everything goes right, 3 reports coming from 3 different entities on the same event, right?
Yes.
Correct, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So think about interfaces, and then you will identify where you would expect the same event to be reported by more than one entity.
It also has the biggest advantage is also that if there's the same mandatory event for different organizations,
yes,
means
yes.
that one organization might be catching something that the other organization didn't catch. So
Yes.
let's say if you had an event where you didn't get de-iced in the proper way as an aircraft operator, and this does not show up under the ground handler, then it means that the ground handler has a gap here of realizing and checking that that they had what fluids to use, for example, and that's the way that they can be reported back to the actual what went wrong in the discussion of the treatment of the aircraft.
Yes.
So it has this not just different perspectives of the same event, but also catching events when they weren't catched by the other, when they weren't caught by the other organization.
Yeah.
Now, I would suggest that this next question that has the next highest number of votes has already been answered, and we move to the next one because it is again about the multiple entries about the same event. But then there is a question here that is different, and I highlight it now. Reporting of ground handling incidents needs to go to EASA, aerodromes, airlines, obviously with the internal incident report. Now, does a reporting into ECAS 2 fulfill those 3 at the same time? Or is the idea that we need to report to 3 bodies in 3 different ways? I'm not sure I fully understand that question. If it's not so clear to you, maybe we can also park it and
It is clear.
Is it clear?
It
So
is clear.
what would be our answer here? Anybody would like to answer?
Ocho, please.
Yes.
Yeah, so ECARES, it's only the authorities, so no information is sent to third parties. So there have to be different communication lines to the other parties that have to be created as well. So if you send your report to ECARES 2, it will not go to the aerodromes, to the airlines, if it's sent in by a ground handler, for example.
That's a very clear answer. So actually, you are also under the obligation to report to your own interlocutors, to your own partners. If you're an aerodrome, you have a responsibility to share safety information directly with airlines and ground handlers that are working on your aerodrome and vice versa, because ECAS is a different story and it will not ensure that feedback loop. Thank you very much. That's very clear.
Yes,
please.
I'm not sure with the answers, if it was all answered. So
Okay.
it is, they will have to report still to their airline, to the aerodrome, in addition to ACARES. ACARES, reporting into ACARES does not mean that it is their reporting obligation to airline or aerodrome is void.
Exactly.
So unfortunately, they still have to do that. That's also why for bigger companies, especially an interface to ACARES is really recommendable, because then it goes automatically.
Yeah, so this is the painful part of reporting. On the one hand, we want to do good because we want all the stakeholders affected to share the same safety information, but to talk safety and find the best solutions together. On the other hand, what is difficult is the fact that the reporting lines go beyond reporting only to the competent authority. What is the intention of the reporting to other entities is to share the safety information. Now, if this means reporting to the reporting through the reporting system of an airline or through the reporting system of an aerodrome, is less relevant than sharing this report in the form in which you are filling it in for your competent authority. So what's relevant is the flow of information, the sharing of the safety information coming from the report, also with the aerodrome operator and with the aircraft operator. But I have to admit, and I think we all have to admit, this is not an easy way. This is not the most efficient way to share this information. And for this, we don't have a solution, I'm afraid.
And before we close this webinar, we still have a final poll for you on how you found this webinar. I think this question is also relevant because it just goes again in the same vein that multiple reporting indeed is going to be your reality. Does the ground handler have to report directly to the competent authority, or can the ground handler report to the operator, to the airline in this case, I guess, and expect the airline to report to the competent authority? Who would like to answer that question?
Joe,
Joe?
go ahead.
Yes, so that's the item, the responsibility of the ground handler. So they have to report as well. They cannot put that responsibility to a third party. They have to respect the procedures, and also they have to follow the regulation in relation to reporting directly to the authority.
Yeah, that's a very
It
clear.
also gives us the opportunity to provide our version of the truth as well. So, you know,
Absolutely.
what an airline says, what a ground handler says, what an aerodrome says is only one person's perspective. So I still fully, you know, as complicated as it is, it's good to have the view from all sides. And just to add on, I mean, you know, advances in technology, and I know we're running out of time, but advances in technology, AI, all of that kind of stuff. You know, we've just started a trial of reporting directly to an airline just recently. So our reports come in, they're classified, and then that report goes directly off to that particular airline into their safety system, which is a different safety system. So we're using API transfers, but it's working. We're getting those initial reports through to the airlines. So we're looking at how we can extend that out going forward. And then also using agentic AI to push reports and that around as well. So I think whilst it is a complicated landscape, there is technical solutions that can certainly assist us going forward, and we just need to make the most of those.
Peter, I think one could not have put it any better, because you are actually saying that it also gives us a voice if there are multiple entry points and you're looking ahead into the future, and actually not the future, it's the present already, where we can make use of new technologies and AI. Absolutely. And I think that was a perfect way to end this webinar with what you said, coming from an industry stakeholder who understands that it is, yes, important to provide reports, and that sometimes it can also mean there will be multiple reports. We have a final poll for you just to give us a feedback on whether you found this webinar interesting. We see that several of you now have to say goodbye because we have been going over time. But I would really like to thank all the speakers again, all the participants to this webinar. Your questions have been very good, and we will provide answers. All the presentations will be put on the EASA website. You will have to get it from the website yourself. We are not going to do any emailing lists, unfortunately, but we will provide the presentations and the Q&A on the website. And I would like to really thank Sarah from EASA, Adina, of course, Adina Sweeney, for organizing this webinar, then Barbara Schaffner from FOCA, Joe Master from Belgian CEA, and Yannick de France, and of course Peter Hunt from Swissport, and Yannick from the EASA France. So thank you very much for participating in this webinar on an important topic, and we will do another one on it, because we realize it's these interfaces, absolutely. Difficult to understand, but very important.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.